Alrighty, so hieroglyphics are an important part of ancient Egyptian culture and history, and it's why we know so much about ancient Egypt. So, first thing is you need to know hieroglyphics are the written language of ancient Egypt. It actually looks like this right here. Each letter or sound had its own symbol. So, like a TH, like th for the, would have its own symbol, or CH, would have its own symbol instead of putting two different symbols next to each other. It was used for history, recording purposes, and economic records. It's why we know the things we know about Egypt. There are a few other things, but we are able to decipher this, and it is their historical records. The word hieroglyph actually comes from two Greek words. Hieros means holy, and glyph means writing. Anytime you see glyph in something, that's exactly what it means. So, literally translated, hieroglyphics means holy writing. So, what did hieroglyphics do? Some of them told stories, whether they be historical account stories or just telling a story. Like we like to pick up a book sometimes and read, that's what they could be. Some were symbols that were used to represent common items or people. So, like, you could have one symbol, then instead of spelling out the word Pharaoh, you could have one symbol that meant Pharaoh. And some, like I said, stood for a sound or a letter. We actually get some of our modern alphabet from hieroglyphics. So that's one thing that we can owe to the Egyptians is some of our writing and our alphabet today. So what did they look like? There were over 800 different hieroglyphs. So obviously not everybody knew how to use hieroglyphics. It would have been a select few that were really well educated in this because 800 different hieroglyphs would have been difficult to remember. Like I said, some represented a single sound, or a complicated sound, or even a whole word. Some hieroglyphs didn't make any sound at all. They would just tell you what kind of word the other hieroglyphs are spelling out. So, for example, if it's the name of a woman, then the scribe or the person writing it out would draw an image of a woman first. If it was a man's name, he'd draw an image of a man and then he'd spell it out. So this doesn't make a sound at all. It's just telling us if it's a male or female. There were other terms like that as well. A lot of Egyptian names make little sentences. Like one name would be Nesmut, which means she belongs to the goddess Mut. So that's another thing that you can think of as you write it out. Again, here's a sample. This is part of a tablet that would have been discovered then. So this is exactly what it looked like. You also had counting systems that were kind of unusual. So as they counted, this right here is fairly self-explanatory, 1 through 9. It's just a stick for each number. So there's 4 sticks to represent 4, 5 to represent 5. 10 is that symbol, and then 100. So if you wanted to say 21, you would draw 2 arches and then a line. As you get into larger numbers, you would have this. So each symbol keeps going, and that's how you could build your numbers. So who could read and write hieroglyphics? Like I said, it wasn't for everyone. Scribes were the people that knew every letter. They were well versed. This was their entire job. It'd just be like nowadays we say, who can perform surgery? Well, a surgeon. They have to know the surgeries. That's their job. Well, a scribe has to know every letter. That's their job. Most ordinary people would only be able to read or write their own name. So they wouldn't know how to read an entire tablet, but they could write down their name. And they could recognize the name of their king. And kings' names were often highlighted anyway because they would have been written in what's called a cartouche, which looks like this. It's this oval shape. So this would have been the pharaoh's name inside here. So if they saw that, they knew it was important, so it was the royalty. So how do you read hieroglyphics? Well, it depends on which way the people or animals are facing. So if an animal in a hieroglyph is facing right, you got to read it from right to left. It tells you which direction to start reading. If the animal is facing left, you have to read it from left to right, which is the way we read our words now. And sometimes they go from top to bottom. So here's some fun facts about hieroglyphics. The first is Egyptians did not write vowels and they did not use any punctuation in their sentences, not unlike some of my students today. Hieroglyphs were written on papyrus reed, which is a water and marsh plant. It's kind of like bamboo. Um, and they have these tall, straight, hollow stems, so they would flatten it out and stick it together and turn it into pages, basically. So papyrus turns into kind of like a paper. The Egyptians also carved their hieroglyphs onto stone, so they could write it out with ink, which would have been made from different materials around them, or they could carve it onto stone or paint it right on walls of tombs. And the writing was used in all kinds of places. You'd learn about it in scribe school, obviously, tomb walls, in fields, temples, and even in the government buildings. So that is the basics of hieroglyphics.